now again, this is our next thing there. The moon say behind there in Antarctic.
Yeah, man.
Like that.
All of the
Moon.
all of our people travel the streets, down to town,
Round
country
the
to country, city to city. If you know this, if you know so it's not safe in the sundown.
Landmark.
It's not safe when the sun goes down. No, it's not safe
Some
when the cops
places
come
where
round. It's not
they
safe
on
when the
regular
sun
maps.
It's not safe in the sundown down. No, it's not safe when the sun burns down.
Or you would have
It's
said
not
them
safe in the sun.
hidden in plain sight.
It's not safe in the southern places.
You know, the map where we see on the globe, some things cut out and for fit round that ball. Look on the shape. And so the places where known to everybody is kept. And the places where they can't hide, kept from maps. Places where they can't hide is not on the globe. Places where they can debunk or hide the stories, them cut them off. But if you check some names, all these stories only been a debunked or a called myth or a pseudo history. Why are these things called pseudo history? Pseudo. I mean, there's something y'all don't want to admit. So they change the name of places so that we can hide things. Pseudo. You know? We are living a lie. The government's a lie to it blatantly if you ask questions okay.
Pseudo-history. Not to be confused with counterfactual history or alternate history. Pseudo-history is a form of pseudo-scholarship that attempts to distort or misrepresent the historical record, often by employing methods resembling those used in scholarly historical research. The related term crypto-history is applied to pseudo-history derived from the superstitions intrinsic to occultism. Pseudo-history is related to pseudoscience and pseudo-archaeology, and usage of the terms may occasionally overlap. Although pseudo-history comes in many forms, scholars have identified many features that tend to be common in pseudo-historical works. One example is that the use of pseudo-history is almost always motivated by a contemporary political, religious, or personal agenda. Pseudo-history also frequently presents sensational claims or a big lie about historical facts which would require unwarranted revision of the historical record. 3. Another hallmark of pseudo-history is an underlying premise that scholars have a furtive agenda to suppress the promoter's thesis, a premise commonly corroborated by elaborate conspiracy theories. Works of pseudo-history often point exclusively to unreliable sources, including myths and legends, often treated as literal historical truth, to support the thesis being promoted while ignoring valid sources that contradict it. Sometimes a work of pseudo-history will adopt a position of historical relativism, insisting that there is really no such thing as historical truth and that any hypothesis is just as good as any other. Many works of pseudo-history conflate mere possibility with actuality, assuming that if something could have happened, then it did. Notable examples of pseudo-history include British Israelism, the lost cause of the Confederacy, the Irish slaves myth, the witch cult, Armenian genocide denial, Holocaust denial, the Clean Weymouth Act myth, the 16th and 17th century Spanish black legend, and the claim that the Katyn massacre was not committed by the Soviet NKVD.
Definition and etymology. The term pseudo-history was coined in the early 19th century, which makes the word older than the related terms pseudo-scholarship and pseudoscience. In an attestation from 1815, it is used to refer to the contest of Homer and Hesiod, a purportedly historical narrative describing an entirely fictional contest between the Greek poets Homer and Hesiod. The pejorative sense of the term, labeling a flawed or disingenuous work of historiography, is found in another 1815 attestation. Pseudo-history is akin to pseudoscience in that both forms of falsification are achieved using the methodology that purports to, but does not, adhere to the established standards of research for the given field of intellectual enquiry of which the pseudoscience claims to be a part, and which offers little or no supporting evidence for its plausibility. Writers Michael Schumer and Alex Grubman define pseudo-history as the rewriting of the past for present personal or political purposes. Other writers take a broader definition. Douglas Achin, a historian of science, contends that when the history of scientific discovery is presented in a simplified way, with drama exaggerated and scientists romanticized, this creates wrong stereotypes about how science works, and in fact constitutes pseudo-history, despite being based on real facts.
Characteristics. Robert Todd Carroll has developed a list of criteria to identify pseudo-historic works. He states that pseudo-history is purported history which treats myths, legends, sagas and similar literature as literal truth, is neither critical nor skeptical in its reading of ancient historians, taking their claims at face value and ignoring empirical or logical evidence contrary to the claims of the ancients, is on a mission, not a quest, seeking to support some contemporary political or religious agenda rather than find out the truth about the past, often denies that there is such a thing as historical truth, clinging to the extreme skeptical notion that only what is absolutely certain can be called true and nothing is absolutely certain, so nothing is true. Often maintains that history is nothing but myth-making and that different histories are not to be compared on such traditional academic standards as accuracy, empirical probability, logical consistency, relevancy, completeness, fairness or honesty, but on moral or political grounds. Is selective in its use of ancient documents, citing favorably those that fit with its agenda, and ignoring or interpreting away those documents which do not fit. Considers the possibility of something being true as sufficient to believe it is true if it fits with one's agenda. Often maintains that there is a conspiracy to suppress its claims because of racism, atheism or ethnocentrism, or because of opposition to its political or religious agenda.
Nicholas Goodrick Clark prefers the term crypto-history. He identifies two necessary elements as a complete ignorance of the primary sources and the repetition of inaccuracies and wild claims. Other common characteristics of pseudo-history are the arbitrary linking of disparate events so as to form in the theorist's opinion a pattern. This is typically then developed into a conspiracy theory postulating a hidden agent responsible for creating and maintaining the pattern. For example, the pseudo-historical The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail links the Knights Templar, the medieval Grail romances, the Merovingian Frankish dynasty and the artist Nicolas Poussin in an attempt to identify lineal descendants of Jesus, hypothesizing the consequences of unlikely events that could have happened, thereby assuming tacitly that they did. Sensationalism, or shock value. Cherry-picking, or law office history, evidence that helps the historical argument being made and suppressing evidence that hurts it.
Categories and examples. Further information, historical negationism and pseudo-archaeology. The following are some common categories of pseudo-historical theory, with examples. Not all theories in a listed category are necessarily pseudo-historical, they are rather categories that seem to attract pseudo-historians. Main categories. Alternative chronologies. An alternative chronology is a revised sequence of events that deviates from the standard timeline of world history accepted by mainstream scholars. An example of an alternative chronology is Anatoly Fomenko's New Chronology, which claims that recorded history actually began around AD 800, and all events that allegedly occurred prior to that point either never really happened at all or are simply inaccurate retellings of events that happened later. 14. One of its outgrowths is the Tartary conspiracy theory. Other, less extreme examples, are the phantom time hypothesis, which asserts that the years AD 614911 never took place, and the new chronology of David Rohl, which claims that the accepted timelines for ancient Egyptian and Israelite history are wrong. 15. Historical falsification. Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, a scene from which is shown in this 15th century illumination, was a popular work of pseudo-history during the Middle Ages. In the 8th century, a forged document known as Donation of Constantine, which supposedly transferred authority over Rome and the western part of the Roman Empire to the Pope, became widely circulated. 16. In the 12th century, Geoffrey of Monmouth published The History of the Kings of Britain, a pseudo-historical work purporting to describe the ancient history and origins of the British people. The book synthesizes earlier Celtic mythical traditions to inflate the deeds of the mythical King Arthur. The contemporary historian William of Newburgh wrote around 1190 that it is quite clear that everything this man wrote about Arthur and his successors, or indeed about his predecessors from Vortigern onwards, was made up, partly by himself and partly by others. 17. Historical revisionism. The Shakespeare authorship question is a fringe theory that claims that the works attributed to William Shakespeare were actually written by someone other than William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon. 18, 19, 20, 21. Another example of historical revisionism is the thesis, found in the writings of David Barton and others, asserting that the United States was founded as an exclusively Christian nation. 22, 23, 24. Mainstream historians instead support the traditional position, which holds that the American founding fathers intended for church and state to be kept separate. 25, 26. Confederate revisionists, aka Civil War revisionists, lost cause advocates, and neo-Confederates argue that the Confederate States of America's prime motivation was the maintenance of states' rights and limited government, rather than the preservation and expansion of slavery. 27, 28, 29. Connected to the lost cause is the Irish slaves myth, a pseudo-historical narrative which conflates the experiences of Irish indentured servants and enslaved Africans in the Americas. This myth, which was historically promoted by Irish nationalists such as John Mitchell, has in the modern day been promoted by white supremacists in the United States to minimize the mistreatment experienced by African Americans, such as racism and segregation, and oppose demands for slavery reparations. The myth has also been used to obscure and downplay Irish involvement in the transatlantic slave trade.
Historical falsification. Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, a scene from which is shown in this 15th century illumination, was a popular work of pseudo-history during the Middle Ages. In the 8th century, a forged document known as Donation of Constantine, which supposedly transferred authority over Rome and the western part of the Roman Empire to the Pope, became widely circulated. In the 12th century, Geoffrey of Monmouth published The History of the Kings of Britain, a pseudo-historical work purporting to describe the ancient history and origins of the British people. The book synthesizes earlier Celtic mythical traditions to inflate the deeds of the mythical King Arthur. The contemporary historian William of Newburgh wrote around 1190 that it is quite clear that everything this man wrote about Arthur and his successors, or indeed about his predecessors from Vortigern onwards, was made up, partly by himself and partly by others. Historical negationism. While closely related to previous categories, historical negationism or denialism specifically aims to outright deny the existence of confirmed events, often including various massacres, genocides, and national histories. Some examples include Holocaust denial, Armenian genocide denial, as well as Nakba denial in the 1984 work From Time Immemorial by Joan Peters. Psychohistory. Main article, Psychohistory. Mainstream historians have categorized psychohistory as pseudo-history. Psychohistory is an amalgam of psychology, history, and related social sciences and the humanities. Its stated goal is to examine the why of history, especially the difference between stated intention and actual behavior. It also states as its goal the combination of the insights of psychology, especially psychoanalysis, with the research methodology of the social sciences and humanities to understand the emotional origin of the behavior of individuals, groups and nations, past and present. Pseudoarchaeology. Pseudoarchaeology refers to a false interpretation of records, namely physical ones, often by unqualified or otherwise amateur archaeologists. These interpretations are often baseless and seldom aligned with established consensus. Nazi archaeology is a prominent example of this technique. 37. Frequently, people who engage in pseudoarchaeology have a very strict interpretation of evidence and are unwilling to alter their stance, resulting in interpretations that often appear overly simplistic and fail to capture the complexity and nuance of the complete narrative.
Various examples of pseudo-history. These following examples can belong to a variety of the above-mentioned categories, or ones not mentioned as well. Ancient aliens, ancient technologies, and lost lands. Main article, Ancient astronauts. Immanuel Velikovsky's books Worlds in Collision, 1950, Ages in Chaos, 1952, and Earth in Upheaval, 1955, which became instant bestsellers, demonstrated that pseudo-history based on ancient mythology held potential for tremendous financial success and became models of success for future works in the genre. In 1968, Erich von Däniken published Chariots of the Gods, which claims that ancient visitors from outer space constructed the pyramids and other monuments. He has since published other books in which he makes similar claims. These claims have all been categorized as pseudo-history. Similarly, Zechariah Sitchin has published numerous books claiming that a race of extraterrestrial beings from the planet Nibiru known as the Anunnaki visited Earth in ancient times in search of gold, and that they genetically engineered humans to serve as their slaves. He claims that memories of these occurrences are recorded in Sumerian mythology, as well as other mythologies all across the globe. These speculations have likewise been categorized as pseudo-history. The ancient astronaut hypothesis was further popularized in the United States by the History Channel television series Ancient Aliens. History professor Ronald H. Fritz observed that the pseudo-historical claims promoted by von Däniken and the Ancient Aliens program have a periodic popularity in the US. In a pop culture with a short memory and a voracious appetite, aliens and pyramids and lost civilizations are recycled like fashions. The author Graham Hancock has sold over 4 million copies of books promoting the pseudo-historical thesis that all the major monuments of the ancient world, including Stonehenge, the Egyptian pyramids, and the Moai of Easter Island, were built by a single ancient supercivilization, which Hancock claims thrived from 15,000 to 10,000 BC and possessed technological and scientific knowledge equal to or surpassing that of modern civilization. He first advanced the full form of this argument in his 1995 bestseller Fingerprints of the Gods, which won popular acclaim, but scholarly disdain. Christopher Knight has published numerous books, including Uriel's Machine, 2000, expounding pseudo-historical assertions that ancient civilizations possessed technology far more advanced than the technology of today. The claim that a lost continent known as Lemuria once existed in the Pacific Ocean has likewise been categorized as pseudo-history. Furthermore, similar conspiracy theories promote the idea of embellished, fabricated accounts of historical civilizations, namely Khazaria and Tartaria.
Antisemitic pseudo-history. See also, blood libel. American edition of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion from 1934. The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion is a fraudulent work purporting to show a historical conspiracy for world domination by Jews. The work was conclusively proven to be a forgery in August 1921, when the Times revealed that extensive portions of the document were directly plagiarized from Maurice Joly's 1864 satirical dialogue The Dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu, as well as Hermann Goetz's 1868 anti-Semitic novel Biarritz. The Khaza theory is an academic fringe theory that postulates the belief that the bulk of European Jewry is of Central Asian, Turkic, origin. In spite of the mainstream academic consensus which conclusively rejects it, this theory has been promoted in anti-Semitic and some anti-Zionist circles. They argue that Jews are an alien element in both Europe and Palestine. Holocaust denial in particular and genocide denial in general are widely categorized as pseudo-history. Major proponents of Holocaust denial include David Irving and others, who argue that the Holocaust, the Holodomor, the Armenian genocide, the Assyrian genocide, the Greek genocide and other genocides did not occur, or accounts of them were greatly exaggerated.
Ethnocentric or nationalist revisionism. See also, historiography and nationalism and national mysticism. Most Afrocentric, i.e. pre-Columbian Africa America's contact theories, see ancient Egyptian race controversy, ideas have been identified as pseudo-historical, alongside the indigenous Aryans theories published by Hindu nationalists during the 1990s and 2000s. The crypto-history developed within Germanic mysticism and Nazi occultism has likewise been placed under this categorization. Among leading Nazis, Heinrich Himmler is believed to have been influenced by occultism and, according to one theory, developed the SS base at Wuhlsburg in accordance with an esoteric plan. The Sun language theory is a pseudo-historical ideology which argues that all languages are descended from a form of Proto-Turkish. The theory may have been partially devised in order to legitimize Arabic and Semitic loanwords occurring in the Turkish language by instead asserting that the Arabic and Semitic words were derived from the Turkish ones rather than vice versa. A large number of nationalist pseudo-historical theories deal with the legendary 10 lost tribes of ancient Israel. British Israelism, also known as Anglo-Israelism, the most famous example of this type, has been conclusively refuted by mainstream historians using evidence from a vast array of different fields of study. Israeli pseudo-history. In 2015, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asserted that Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, gave Adolf Hitler and other Nazi leaders the idea for the Holocaust. Historians across the world, along with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, and the German government, characterized the claim as historically baseless. The PLO and the Zionist Union said the statement was politically motivated because it wrongly places blame for the Holocaust on Palestinian nationalists, whom Netanyahu opposes, while implicitly absolving Hitler.
The Christ myth theory claims that Jesus of Nazareth never existed as a historical figure and that his existence was invented by early Christians. This argument currently finds very little support among scholars and historians of all faiths and has been described as pseudo-historical.
Pre-Columbian transoceanic contact theories. Main article: Pre-Columbian transoceanic contact. Excluding the Norse colonization of the Americas, most theories of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact have been classified as pseudo-history, including claims that the Americas were actually discovered by Arabs or Muslims. Gavin Menzies' book 1421, The Year China Discovered the World, which argues for the idea that Chinese sailors discovered America, has also been categorized as a work of pseudo-history. Racist pseudo-history. Josiah Priest and other 19th-century American writers wrote pseudo-historical narratives that portrayed African Americans and Native Americans in an extremely negative light. Priest's first book was The Wonders of Nature and Providence, displayed, 1826. The book is regarded by modern critics as one of the earliest works of modern American pseudo-history. Priest attacked Native Americans in American Antiquities and Discoveries of the West, 1833, and African Americans in Slavery, as it relates to the Negro, 1843. Other 19th-century writers, such as Thomas Gould Appleton, in his A Sheaf of Papers, 1875, and George Perkins Marsh, in his The Goths in New England, seized upon false notions of Viking history to promote the superiority of white people, as well as to oppose the Catholic Church. Such misuse of Viking history and imagery re-emerged in the 20th century among some groups promoting white supremacy.